NorCal, 209 King of Comedy. It's Rick without the K. James presents, in my opinion, podcast.
All right, you guys. So I wanted to talk about systematic racism and how the actions of the past still affect today, right? You hear stupid people say stupid shit sometimes, where they're like,
I'm usually that person.
Yeah. You hear white folks say, "Well, I didn't own any slaves, so why does any of this shit matter to me?" Right? And then, so you hear from both sides. Where one of the people that I watch a lot of Bill Maher shit sometimes, right? And one of the guests that he has on there, brilliant fucking man. If you guys don't know who Cornel West is, then you're losing out.
Dr. Cornel West.
He's from Sacramento.
Oh, he is?
Is he? I didn't know
he was from SAC, but
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know
cool.
that.
Shouts out to SAC, right? So, but he's the exact opposite of the person that we were talking about. I'd like to see those two debate, Candace Owens and Cornel West.
She's like Cornel East. She's just on the other direction all the way.
That's not even a debate.
So, I guess we'll let you lead off, Lamills, this time. And do you think that there's still systematic racism that exists today?
Without question. And information proves it out. So, one of the best examples of it is in looking at systemic racism, I typically look at the school systems. So, depending upon what neighborhood you live in and the value of those homes, that determines how much money goes to the local schools.
Yeah.
We also know that school systems, I should say that housing in America was established based upon racism, 100% racism. And so in the South especially, I went to all black schools. I went to, I should say my elementary school was about 90% black, my middle school was about 60% black, and my high school was 100% black. All right? And this was during a time of forced integration. And so essentially, if it's forced integration, everybody should have been mixed, right? Well, when they started busing the projects that I grew up in to the once white community, all the white folk packed up and left, and the school became 90% black. Then they shipped us out to another school, and so they eventually had about 6 different projects bussed out to this place called Forest Acres in Columbia, South Carolina, and all the white folk left and established private schools. All of a sudden, these Christian schools were coming up to actually house all the white people who didn't want to go to school with the black people. In 1986, when I was in high school, or starting high school, they stopped forced integration. That whole community, that school that I went to in middle school that was 60% black and 40% white, next year was 80% white. They're like, oh, black folk got to go where they're zoned to C.A. Johnson and to W.A. Perry. So now all the white folk came back from the private schools. They're like, oh, the black folk gone. We can come back to these schools now. And the key piece to that, though, is the money that goes into those schools come directly from the value of the housing. Well, if you're putting black folk only in non-equity based housing, the majority of the times, and that's how your zoning is set up, or if you're actually going to put a oil or industrial type, it's just not oil, but industrial type complex right next to a community that's full of black folk or brown folk, the value of all of those houses are going to drop. So what does your zoning look like within those scenarios? And this is what America intentionally did. This is what the federal government intentionally did. These communities here, around here right now, most of them have deeds that specifically say you can't actually have black and brown folk living in those communities.
Here in Sacramento?
In Modesto, in L.A., in Sacramento.
I'm just asking because we brought that up on the last episode.
And so those things are still in place because they haven't gone back to replace the deeds. But the point is when you have an environment that says that we're going to continue to allow the wealth to be gained from equity and the amount of money, tax dollars and mill dollars, that's going to go to those local schools, you're automatically going to see where mostly white people are in housing that's better, and their schools are going to get funded better. The districts that are actually lined up to make sure that that's the case are going to get more resources. And so that systemic racism all the way down to the point of who's at the schools, who's making the decisions, what do they look like, what do their families look like, what are their test scores, why are their test scores good, how often are the kids in school? Oh, these kids are getting sick because they live right next to an industrial plant. These don't. Why not? Oh, because that's how it's zoned. And so systemic racism runs through everything that happens in this country. And there's a belief from so many who choose not to learn history, who choose not to recognize what's going on in the greater community, to act like, oh no, nothing, it's all fair. It's all, we work hard to live in the house that we live in. And why should we have to actually take care of those kids and those families over there who don't do their fair share?
But in our defense, as white people, history makes us look bad. And we don't like that.
Right.
If it was told truthfully.
We don't want
Let
that
us
story.
edit it. It'll be fine, okay?
Exactly.
Give us a red pen. We'll go through it.
Yes.
It'll be wonderful.
So systemic racism lives. It lives constantly. It's in everything that we do in the United States. We don't have a choice. And this goes back to the conversation earlier about reparations and other pieces, to actually to shift those long-term pieces, because you get many people who will say that, and you'll get many people who move from other countries who will say, well, I'm not even from here, so why should I have to be punished by this and this? It's like, the benefits that you're getting from actually coming to these United States of America are still directly an outcome of the oppression that America put on parts of its groups. And you're now getting financial benefit from that, and you did nothing to actually help us achieve the things where we are today. And so, bro, systemic racism is strong. It's a book over there called The Color of Law. And so, we got to deal with that.
Do you think it's and you hear this, right? You hear that, well, maybe it's not racism, maybe it's socioeconomic, maybe it's where you live. But it just seems to me like more minorities live in poorer areas. And that's got to be a reason, right? So
by design.
By design, right? So,
and it ain't the poor, folk that's actually designing that outcome. This was designed by the United States of America, and so and local laws continue that stuff. I live up here in Roseville, California, right? And so we talk about housing in California and how the increase in housing is happening greatly in terms of the people can't afford to buy a house.
Yeah.
And there's not enough housing here. So, some cities are actually saying, well, we're going to create more affordable housing or we're going to create more housing that has multifamily homes. We're going to look at these accessible dwelling units and so on and so forth. And then some communities are like, we don't want any of that here. We just want single family homes. We want suburbs and so on and so forth. And the reality is like the community where I live, there's a whole bunch of retail all over here. Like you can buy anything up here. There's the next new store will be here tomorrow. You got your Costco's and your Walmarts and your Targets and your living spaces and everything at the mall and all of their fancy stores. Who works at all those places? Whoever's working at all those places, they can't afford to buy a house in the city. Not only can they not afford to buy a house in the city, they can't afford to even pay for rent in the city. And there's not even enough rental spaces for them to even move in here. However, we keep building houses only for people who can pay for a house that's $400,000, $500,000 and above. Why aren't we making houses for people who are making $80,000? Well, because we look at their dollar and say those are bad dollars and these are good dollars. And to your point, more often than not, based upon America's history, ethnic minorities, poor people are in that scenario. And so you're now telling all the people who can't afford that they have to go and live somewhere else. This is how LA got so crazy. You got to go and live somewhere else, but you got to drive here to work. So now you got to pay for a car. You already have substandard housing. You're now living someplace else. So every day you got to get on the road. You got to get your kid to school. Like I got into most trouble as a kid when my mom wasn't home. Right?
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody does. Like, because if you getting in trouble when mom home, then we got to switch to mom. But typically parents aren't home. But it's usually the poor families, whereas mom or dad gets up for work in the morning and they leave the kids. Kids got to figure out how to get to the bus stop and get to school. And then the kids come back home and they're there until 5, 6 o'clock until parents come home. The richer families aren't dealing with that. But the poor families are stuck on the highway during this process. All of this is a design based upon the housing that's actually put in place, based upon the zoning that was created, based upon the original intent of racism that actually started that whole thing. So is systemic racism real and well? Absolutely. And it impacts us every day in all of these decisions. So when we're complaining about traffic, It's racism that's causing that. And in a couple of days, they're going to probably say that we want more tax dollars to add more lanes to highways because we're sick of sitting on the road all this time. It's like you're willing to pay taxes to give more lanes for white folk to actually go shopping, but you're not willing to give taxes or to actually cause developers to pay dollars to make sure that ethnic minorities can actually have a place to live and can afford it. It's like, it's all about choice. All about choice. All right, we got too serious. Give me a jump.
Well, we're talking about systemic racism, and I think that's really racist that with sound systems, Beats by Dre is so much better than anything that white people have ever produced. That's systemic racism. That sound system, it's fucked up, man.
What about Ray J, right?
What about Ray? What about Raycon? Raycon, they've been going wireless from the beginning. I'll pay you $1 million if you can name 10 Ray J songs.
He has 10 songs.
I can lower that to half a million.
Ray J is now it's become the headphones and Kim Kardashian. That's it. So,
well, and the great product placement would be if he had those in while he was in the sex tape. Like that would be the best because nobody's cared about what Ray J's done since. If I had one wish, there I named one song. He has one
that's
song.
His song?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, he said I think so.
Yeah. I'm 72% sure that's Ray J.
So, all right. You got anything to add about systemic racism?
Nothing productive.
Boy, Charlie Murphy, my main man, Rick James. That's the one you think, the comedian Rick James. Get up.
I can't hear my neighbor crying, I can't breathe.
Please hit the subscribe button down low so you can see all new clips, all new episodes coming to you.